Mr. Speaker, how are you?
Good John, I'm doing good.
Welcome to New York.
Glad to be here.
Paul Ryan comes out with a plan because Medicare is going bankrupt. We're now dealing with a really pivotal moment in the American economy. And the president comes out and says about the Ryan plan that kids with autism, Down syndrome, and the elderly will have to, quote, fend for themselves. That's not what's in the plan.
That's not what's in the plan at all. Listen, Medicare is going bankrupt. The Medicare trustees have said, if we don't make changes, this program is going to go bankrupt, and benefits are necessarily going to have to be cut. No, nobody wants to see seniors' benefits being cut, and so we've got to do something. Okay, they don't like our plan. What's their plan? And frankly, their plan is to do nothing.
Well, does that make it difficult that you have, on the one hand, you got a cordial friendship, you can play golf, and then the president goes out and demagogues what you're representing at a really important time in history? You know, how do you compartmentalize that?
Well, it's part of the process. But where we are right now is that, we're too close to the next election. You know, I know we just got through the last election, but the president, I think, is spending too much time thinking about the next election as opposed to doing what the country wants him to do right now, and that's to focus on the economy and jobs. And that's why dealing with this debt ceiling increase in a responsible way is critically important, because it'll bring confidence to business people in the United States. It'll help create jobs if we're willing to take on the big challenges that face us.
August 2nd, we're told, is the deadline. Now, we're expecting, and it was just reported today, that Tim Geithner is going to come out and say veterans' benefits are going to be cut. The elderly are going to lose their benefits. So we're up on a real pivotal deadline here. Eric Cantor and John Kyle, Senator Kyle, walked out of the meetings with the vice president. At this late hour, the president's getting involved. But it seems to be an issue, and tell me if I'm wrong, Democrats want to raise taxes to get us, to get some cuts involved. Where are you with this?
No tax increases.
Zero. Off the table.
I've made it clear to the president, we're not going to raise taxes. You can't raise taxes on the very people that we expect to invest in our economy and to create jobs. Secondly, there are no votes in the Congress, in the House or the Senate. There's not a majority to raise taxes on anyone. So tax increases are off the table. And I'm not sure that they've gotten the message yet, but there aren't going to be any tax increases.
Then why would they keep pushing for it in these negotiations?
I'm just not sure they've been dealing with reality.
All right. Senator DeMint and Senator Hatch, and in the House on your side, you have a lot of your caucus now likes the idea of cut spending now, cap in terms of the amount of spending in the future, and a balanced budget amendment. You support that?
I do. And I think that it's important that we get real cuts and real changes in spending now. I've been a big supporter of the balanced budget amendment over my career. I've always voted for it, and I'll vote for it again.
Is this reality? Do you think at this moment in history, when the nation is focused on the debt, on record deficits, on very high unemployment, real unemployment, that you think you can get the president to go along with this? Any indication that he might?
I don't know, but we've got a vote scheduled. I think Eric Cantor, our majority leader, scheduled a debate and vote on the balanced budget amendment with limitations on the ability to raise taxes and limitations on the ability to increase spending. And I think that's coming the week of July 25th.
Those limitations to limit spending and raise taxes, would that be a supermajority, 2/3?
That's correct.
And that's would be a big change. Look, the process of amending the Constitution is difficult. But I'm wondering if this might be the time. Is this for you a main issue in terms of negotiation? And I'm not expecting you to negotiate here on this program. But how important is that going to be as you sit down with the president and you have your discussions and what your caucus is willing to do?
Well, the president, as you're well aware, is not involved in any constitutional amendment. It has to pass the House and Senate.
Then go to the states.
With a 2/3 majority, and then goes to the states. And I think it's important for the House to have this fight. I think the Senate's going to have the fight the week before we do in the House. And it's going to be important that we get all the votes that we can to try to demonstrate that this is possible.
What happened? You met last Wednesday evening with the president. You haven't met with him since, right?
No.
How did it go Wednesday?
We actually had a very honest conversation. about the state of our economy, the fact that the Federal Reserve is they're out of gimmicks. The world economy is slowing. The debt problems in Europe are significant, and it's really important that we not miss this opportunity to make real changes, real cuts in spending, real changes to our long-term structural debt problems. This is a real opportunity to address that, and I don't want to miss it.
All right. What is more important? Because there's going to be a lot of fear the longer this goes on, as we get up to this August 2nd deadline. There's going to be a lot of fear out there. A lot of people are going to be talking about the full faith credit of the United States government and defaulting. What do you think would be worse if one is worse than the other? Defaulting or not dealing with the structural problem? In other words, not sending a message to the world that we're serious about getting control of our debt.
Nobody believes that the United States is going to walk away from its obligations. But I'm going to tell you, Sean, when I said this is the moment and this is the opportunity, it's exactly what I mean. Dealing with this debt problem and this deficit problem is far more important than meeting some artificial date created by the Treasury Secretary. We cannot miss this opportunity. If we want jobs to come to America, we've got to give American business people the confidence to invest in our economy. Today, they don't have that confidence.
What happened in the 2011 budget deal? Because when it was first announced, we heard it was $60 billion that you had cut. And then that number got reduced to $38 billion. And then by the time it was analyzed even further, it was down just hundreds of millions and not even billions. What happened on that deal?
Well, that's not really true. The House passed $61 billion worth of cuts. I tried to do everything I could to get that enacted. The president wouldn't agree.
Right.
What we did was we got $38.5 billion worth of cuts that the Congressional Budget Office says will save hundreds of billions of dollars over the next 10 years. There's a lot of confusion out there about budget outlays versus expenditures. At the end of the day, it's all cash that was available for the government to spend. Pulling that back was a first step. And the fact is this: we're going to spend $79.5 billion less than what the president wanted to spend this year in that 1/3 of the budget that we call discretionary spending. And the fact is, we're going to spend $38.5 billion less than we spent last year in that 1/3 of the budget.
Then why was all the reports that kept reducing the original number?
Because people got into this debate over outlays versus expenditures, and they confuse people. But those are the facts.
Mm-hmm. All right, let me just run through. The CBO had some chilling numbers and conclusions that they came out with, and I just want to read a couple of things that they pointed out. We are headed for the most predictable economic crisis in American history, and Washington is not providing the leadership we need to avoid it. That's a frightening and chilling.
It's a very direct statement.
Yeah.
And coming from a government agency is even more remarkable. But we can't continue to spend money we don't have. We can't borrow 42 cents for every dollar the federal government is going to spend this year. A budget deficit of $1.5 trillion. And according to the president's budget, trillion-dollar deficits for as far as the eye can see. This is not sustainable. It has to be stopped. We took a small step earlier this year. Now it's time for the big step. Let
me just give this, and maybe you can explain this to people in terms, because I think we get into millions and billions and people and trillions, and people get confused. The CBO projected that public debt is going to reach 70% of GDP this year. The normal historical average, putting aside World War II, is what, about 18%, 17%, and other years 11%, very, very low. The historical average is about 18, 19%. So they predict by 2021, 91% of GDP, and then they predict it going to 101%, and then they predict it going to 200% by 2030. So that means we're going to spend 2 times the amount we take in.
Well, this is not sustainable, and the American people know it. That's why I don't want, and my team doesn't want, this opportunity to escape us. It's time for the president to get serious about cutting spending now and making real changes so that the debt curve out in the future turns down dramatically.
Even Greece, and we see what's going on there, is 150% of GDP. So we're on this trajectory. The Democrats, though, have been using these tactics, predictable fear tactics, meta-scare, we call it. You know, how are you going to counter the predictable attacks against conservatives and Republicans by the president, he's already done it, and by the Democratic leadership?
Well, I don't know that we want to outline the steps that we're going to take, but they're going to come. It's pretty clear to me that we're going to see the Treasury Department or the Social Security Department send letters out suggesting that, oh, my goodness, you might not get your Social Security check next month, or we may have to stop payments to Medicare providers unless this debt ceiling is dealt with. It's predictable. It's going to come. What we've got to do is continue to press our case to the American people that cutting spending now and dealing with our long-term debt will help create a better environment for job creators in our country.
Last point on the CBO. They said Medicare is unsustainable. Paul Ryan put forward a plan. Can you explain to people how this won't impact, as the president said, kids with autism, kids with Down syndrome, and the elderly, that they'll have to fend for themselves? What is the plan?
What it does is give every American who's on Medicare the opportunity to choose a health care plan that fits their needs. Guaranteed issue. Nobody's going to be denied. And for most of the population, we will pay the full cost of that premium, if you will. You know, Medicare recipients today pay a small premium every month. They'll continue to pay that. But if you're wealthy and you've got substantial assets beyond your Social Security, we're going to expect you to actually pay the cost of your premium. But it's not going to affect anybody in the middle class or below. It'll actually give you choices of a private sector plan that will actually cover more than what Medicare covers today.
More, in other words, it'll go to the states, and the states will, in other words, that money will be allocated?
It's no. Just like the prescription drug plan that seniors have available to them today. They get to choose whatever kind of plan they want. They pay a portion of that cost. The government pays a portion of that cost. Why shouldn't Medicare have the same kind of opportunity where the private sector would actually offer these plans in a variety of plans to seniors?
What about Social Security? Similarly, it's headed for bankruptcy. Is means testing inevitable? Raising the eligibility age, is that inevitable?
At some point it is. I would hope the president would deal with it. When I said everything's on the table except raising taxes, I meant everything's on the table.
Yeah.
We know we've got long-term problems in Social Security. We know it has to be dealt with. And the longer we wait, the harder it's going to be to make the changes necessary to ensure that the program is sustainable and there for those seniors who need it.
Pretty profound, though, when you think about it. We take in $2.2 trillion a year, and we spend $1.65 trillion more than we even took in. It's almost double. We're spending double what we take in.
John, I've been watching leaders for 20 years that I've been in Washington. Every year they look at this problem. And it's like they look up at a mountain, they see how tall it is, and they see how steep it is, and decide, nah, we're going to kick the can down the road another year. Well, guess what? We're out of road to kick the can down. Now is the time to deal with it.
All right, let me ask you just one or two foreign policy questions. The battle, the president, the War Powers Act in Libya, and recently you had a vote in the House saying, you know what, you don't feel that there's a defined mission by the president. Explain why that vote went out that way. Well,
I've never seen an administration act so precipitously when it came to engaging American troops on foreign soil. There was no consultation, there was no discussion, not with members of Congress, not with the American people. Next thing you know, we've got troops flying missions in Libya. And so there's a constitutional battle that's taking place here between the Congress and the president over the fact that there was no consultation, there was no authorization. Secondly, we get into this whole issue of what's the mission? What's our goal here?
He said there were no hostilities.
Yeah, right. Well, nobody bought that nonsense at all. But what's our strategic interest here? You know, the plan is to protect innocent civilians and hope that Colonel Gaddafi goes away. Well, guess what? I asked a question 2 days into this. Mr. President, what if he doesn't go away? I didn't get an answer.
All right, Mr. Speaker, we really appreciate you coming in.
John, nice to see you.